Welcome to Keiser Voices, the story of success, brought to you by Keiser University Graduate School, here where the academic world meets personal triumph. Join us today as we dive into the captivating tales of success.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Keiser Voices. We're wrapping up our Mental Health Month celebration for May and moving into all things criminal justice, but we're doing so from a different vantage point. And to kick us off, we have Dr. Barbara Cooke, who is a professor here at the graduate school at Keiser University as a member of the Criminal Justice and Homeland Security team. Dr. Cooke, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So I want to bring up your doctorate because it really is the basis of today's conversation. It's literally become your life work, which is our goal for all of our doctoral students. But when you graduated from Cambridge University with your doctorate, your specialization was on dog training prison programs, and your research centered around the impact that they have on mental health and rehabilitation and inmates in general. Is that a good synopsis of?
That's a great synopsis.
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
absolutely, for sure.
So
yes,
what I think I want to start off before this all the recording started. We were introducing everybody to our dogs, so we're all dog lovers here. I've seen there used to be an old show on TLC. It was called Pit Bulls and Parolees. It might even still air. So I think some of us have this TV version of this knowledge, but can you tell us a little bit about what dog training prison programs are and how they work?
Absolutely. So I'm glad you mentioned Pit Bulls and Parolees. They are still around, and because a lot of people are familiar, I want to start by talking about that type of program because it does directly relate to prison dog training programs in a few senses. So some of the primary obstacles associated with this, with people coming out of prisons when they're reentering society, they face a lot of obstacles, and one of them is finding gainful and meaningful employment. And we know that if it's meaningful and gainful employment, it's better than just any employment. You're more likely to be able to actually sustain a pro-social, non-crime committing life if you're able to do that. But that is difficult to do when you have felony convictions. So the reason I'm bringing that up is, with Pit Bulls and Parolees, one of the reasons why the program started to begin with was trying to provide meaningful and gainful employment for probationers and parolees, because that's a condition of parole and probation, is usually that you have to have a job, right? So they were providing a service by hiring people who are difficult to hire, training them with these incredible skills in animal husbandry, animal rescue, kennel care, grooming, all these sorts of things. So that's great. So, and a lot of people are familiar with that. So keep that in mind when I now venture into this. So that is through the gates, as we would call, or on the other side of the gates, actually. But prison dog training programs were also started for similar reasons. The very first one was actually in Washington State in the early 80s. It was founded by a nun and an human-animal interaction researcher, and they wanted to provide not only a service for rescuing dogs, and I'll get into exactly what they are in a second, but they wanted to also take on this idea that we can train these valuable skills and hopefully help people find jobs on the outside. So what are prison dog training programs? So they are programs in which either inmates or people who are incarcerated, or even juveniles who have been adjudicated and are in a training school or the like. There's different terminology in juvenile justice. And they train dogs primarily for either being, I mentioned before, to actually help dogs get adopted. So one of the most popular formats is where an animal shelter has partnered with this prison program, and they'll take often dogs that would be deemed unadoptable. Maybe they have behavior issues or are scared, or just have been sitting in the shelter for a while and haven't been adopted, and they'll take them and they actually train them to pass basic obedience, often actually getting to actually be certified with the AKC Canine Good Citizenship Test, which is great. Another format is for service dogs. And this can look quite different depending on the type of service animal being trained. The originally, a lot of them were for seeing eye dogs, hearing dogs, and a lot of times they would take lab puppies who have been specifically bred to be service dogs that have the characteristics of good service dogs. So they're partnered with a organization that actually trains seeing eye dogs and dogs for people who are deaf, and gives them the basic obedience that they would need, and then they get their specialized training after they're a couple years old or so. So that has expanded now. A lot of them are PTSD dogs for veterans, explosive detection dogs, search and rescue dogs. There's all kinds of service dog training programs now. And sometimes they take shelter dogs that have the good qualities for these purposes and provide that specialized training. So essentially you have two primary types, one with service dogs and one with shelter dogs who are trained basic obedience. The other really interesting point to make is there are a lot of other types of animal programs where dogs and other animals, like horses, for example, or cats, are brought into prisons for therapeutic purposes. And those also play an important role in all of this. But for the purposes of this talk and the type of research we're talking about, I'm going to focus on the training side, because there's some key differences in basically how long you're spending with the dog, right? Where you're going to expect to have more of an effect of human-animal interaction, which is largely what our conversation will be about, than you would if you're just periodically interacting with a dog. Great for you, still wonderful, still therapeutic, just different type.
So, I mean, that's amazing, because you're giving, a second chance to some of the shelter dogs, and even having more individuals who have the knowledge to help people by providing service dogs. But when we look at this interaction with the animals, what impact do they have on the mental health of those that are incarcerated individuals? I know, one side of the gate, the other side of the gate. So I think I want to keep it more towards like those that are incarcerated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to understand exactly why these effects why there would be any kind of effect, because we all know, like, if you're a dog person, I should say, how you feel when you interact with a dog, right?
Right.
So your body relaxes, there's a smile on your face. Usually, if you have a hard day, it'll make your day a little bit better, even if it's just for a few moments. So we're familiar with that reaction. Well, there's actually a lot of physiological responses that human bodies have when they're interacting with animals, and especially with dogs. So this translates, of course, to even if you don't even think about the fact, I'm training a dog, I'm in this program, I'm going to learn some life skills, I'm going to save some lives. You may not even realize it, but you're actually doing your body and your mental health and your well-being a service by being in the programs as well. So there is growing body of evidence in terms of research on the direct impacts of dog training program participation on mental health, well-being, the psychological effects. But a lot of the primary research about what we know about human-animal interaction comes from other fields, actually. So it kind of becomes interdisciplinary. But some of so let's talk about some of those benefits, though, because I can talk about this all the time, right? But so we have reduced tension and stress, increased reduced tension and stress, and increased focused attention, increased self-esteem, decreases in depressive symptoms. And then related to this is also the social support side of it as well. So having unconditional support and love in an animal, that somebody's not judging you, and it creates this humanization factor where you are a human, you are not a number, you are not just a person who's incarcerated. You're a real human being, and this dog is providing you with that support. That really helps a lot with social skills as well, and decreased aggression. So a lot of the, wardens and prison staff would always comment about how they don't really have to worry about the units with the dogs in them because they don't have the fights, they don't have the behavioral issues and aggression and the tension that other units have. And there's also, so in terms of the physiological side of it all, there are also cardiovascular benefits that are also reduced or associated with reduced cortisol, that reduce stress, that reduce tension. And there's even been a lot of research about specifically measuring the neurochemical differences that are associated with that. So with that becomes a conditioned relaxation response. That's largely related, like I mentioned, to reductions in cortisol, but also increases in beta endorphin, oxytocin, prolactin, phenylacetic acid, and dopamine. So these are all going to be bonding hormones, stress reduction hormones, and neurochemicals, and ones that are going to flood you with feelings of happiness and bonding. So consistent interaction with the dogs that you get from being in the program, because for the most part, well, I don't say the most part, but a lot of programs, perhaps the majority of programs, the inmates actually, the people who are incarcerated, the participants actually get to keep the dogs in the cells with them, or if they're in a dormitory style, in a kennel next to their bunk. And they are the primary caretaker. So they get to, just like you have with your pets, right? You get that constant bond where they get to be with you. And so you're not just getting kind of these one-off benefits, which is still great. And it's great for actually the other people who are incarcerated and the general population who aren't in the program. When they get to interact with the dogs, they get that benefit, but you get more of that benefit when you're actually the primary caregiver. So it can really change your entire experience of serving time in prison, in a way that really no other, to my knowledge, no other program has been able to offer.
And that's amazing, especially talking about the reduction of stress, anxiety. I think aggression was a really important thing, because I think when we think of people in jail, we think aggression. I know recently in the news you saw inmates escaping jail, so I think aggression is that first thought that comes to mind. But what else is the research saying about that? Like, are they saying that, that transition from incarceration to parolee probationer, that it's a more of a success? I mean, is there other things that are coming out of this research because of these programs?
Yes. And I will emphasize we still need more rigorous, high quality research to really test this, but there is a growing body of research. And one of the things that I was able to do in my research with my dissertation chair and mentor and colleagues, we actually did a systematic review and a meta-analysis of the studies that have been out there. And we categorized the outcomes into internalizing outcomes, which are ones like we just spoke about, mental health, well-being, social skills, and then externalizing outcomes. So these are behavioral infractions, recidivism. Recidivism is reoffending. So we also included like rearrest, reoffending, reincarceration, any of that. And we found that there was a statistically significant reduction in these externalizing outcomes. We saw increases in self-control, reduced behavioral infractions, reduced recidivism. And so in other words, what does that mean? That means that it does suggest that these programs help participants have a more successful reentry and also engage in less, unfortunately, stereotypical prison behavior of fights and any kind of disturbances and behavioral infractions and the like. So it does seem to have quite an important impact, and it's an important because these are very inexpensive programs. A lot of them don't use any taxpayer dollars, so you really have the potential to see some incredible benefits of having one of these programs, and very few negative effects. So
How might this research influence, like the future of rehabilitation programs?
Absolutely. That's a great question and so vitally important. I think dog training programs are a fantastic example of what I term as innovative and alternative forms of correctional programming. They were born out of some research and some noticeable needs in a community, right? That they
Mhm.
needed. They had dogs that needed to be adopted, um, and they found a way to incorporate that. And they took that and ran with it, and it grew an incredible popularity. There's over 330 correctional facilities in the United States and worldwide who have implemented a program. That's huge, especially one that wasn't born out of research, which actually we usually frown upon. But there, as it was being rolled out, there were plenty of pilot studies, and there were plenty of studies going on early on. So I give them a pass on that. But it doesn't conform to a lot of other programs. So, and in this classification, I would also include things like art and yoga, reading groups, philosophy groups, these types of, as I said, innovative and alternative programs. This kind of research is showing we need to pay more attention to them, because there could be these benefits that we may not have even really considered, and definitely not measured, and made the connections to reduced reoffending and all these beneficial outcomes that we want prison programs to be. They're not your standard cognitive behavioral therapy programs. You're not standard R&R models, which is our risk need responsivity models. They don't form they don't conform to traditional ideas of what programs can look like. And there's benefits and drawbacks to both of them. Like the big drawback is a lot of dog training programs are hard to research. The reason why you don't have a lot of great research is they're small programs. They're difficult to compare. They're all kind of operate a little bit differently. So we also need research to know what's going to be the best model, or the one that can
Mhm.
optimize the benefits the most, right? Um, but not only can we learn about the impacts of course, human animal interaction on participants, but also these skills, these interpersonal skills, these employability skills. These are wonderful venues and things that we know are so important on the outside. Like if we go back to the pit bulls and parolees, right? This
Mhm.
is ultimately we want to help empower people to have the best chance of success once they've left. So I think not only can we learn from the benefits that dog training programs have actually demonstrated, but also that we really need to pay more attention to these other types of programs that may also yield similar benefits.
I have a feeling we could go on forever on this topic.
That's
And
why I
like
was like, I'm gonna stop.
you can see your passion, and I'm loving it because I've always grown up with dogs, and I do believe that they can see into your soul,
Yeah.
if you will. I think any animal can. They say the same about horses. But can we talk a little bit about positive psychology podcasts?
Oh yes, I'm so excited. So glad you brought that up. All right, so let me start with the origin of that. So I was invited to speak at the University of Colorado's Anschutz School of Medicine Grand Rounds. So basically, where all their doctors they have these talks throughout the year. And during that time, I met Dr. Rachel Davis and Dr. Stephanie, um, and we really hit it off. We really enjoyed talking about dogs. We really enjoyed talking about this type of research and the impact of animals on psychological well-being, because they are psychologists and psychiatrists. So we decided, you know what we need to do? Let's bring this and talk about this to the public. So we started a podcast. We a couple times a year we publish one, and they have various different topics related to dogs and uh well, animals in general. I'll be nice. We have been nice. We've broadened it on. Large focus on
You've
dogs.
acknowledged that there's other animals out
There
there.
are other animals, and you can, as you pointed out with horses, for example, there are a lot of great therapeutic benefits. But looking at very specific psychological topics, so we've had one on animals and eating disorders. We've had one on animals and anxiety, and also on kind of on the veterinary medicine approach side of things for veterinary practitioners out there. So, and it's great. We invite students, we invite the general public, we invite psychologists and criminologists. And we're going to be, one of the ones coming up is going to be more back to the corrections than I do. So, but it's been great because it just goes to show there's such an interdisciplinary crossover. We can learn so much from each other. And it's a way of bringing our research and our passions to the people.
And it can also help, with what you were talking about, influencing future rehabilitation programs. So
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. So we're including a link to that podcast in the comments below, because it's positive, spelled PAW, a little play on words for you all. But Dr. Cooke, this has been a very, I think, eye-opening and very enriching conversation. I couldn't think of a better way to wrap up Mental Health Month and kick off our conversations with criminal justice. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And if anybody wants to hear me ramble more and more, just let me know, because I can talk about this all day, every day. So.
Well, if you guys want to keep the conversation going with Dr. Cooke, be sure to check out the Positive Psychology podcast. And then be sure to like, share, subscribe, and follow, and join us for our conversation and taking a really in-depth look at the criminal justice system and some very important issues and conversations that need to be had. And if you didn't check out Mental Health Month, take a listen. We had some great messages from all of our guests, and thank you again to Dr. Cooke, and we will catch you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you for journeying with us today on Keiser Voices, the story of success. As we close this chapter, remember, every story has its next page.